Most programming languages use functions to allow for repeated use of a set of code. There are a variety of ways of triggering a function to play. In some cases, these functions are triggered by user input, such as a mouse click or a keystroke on the keyboard. In this case, the cannon shoots every time the user clicks the left mouse button. In other cases, we want a function to be running constantly as a consequence of the simple passing of time. In the case of the shot moving out of the cannon, it moves every time a frame passes in the game, in this case 24 times per second. This video will explain the code that makes this work and demonstrates examples of the syntax you will use under a few conditions. First, we want to understand listeners. A listener is a bit of code that pays attention for a specific thing to happen. When that thing happens, it triggers the function it is connected to. The syntax for the listener statement starts with the name of the instance or object you're adding the listener to, followed by a dot or period. This is followed by the add event listener keyword. The listener itself lives in parentheses and includes three pieces of information: the class of the listener type, and the function being called. In our examples, we'll take a look at two different listener types, the EnterFrame and the mouse click. In the case of a mouse click, we must first specify what we expect the user to click on. This might be a button, a move clip symbol, or even the stage itself. Let's try it. Here we have a symbol called button 1. To create a listener for this, we write button1 dot add event listener, left parenthesis, mouse event dot click, comma, and that click is in all caps. Then the name of the function we are calling. Wrap up the line by closing your parentheses and ending the statement with a semicolon. Now if you run this, you're going to get an error because the function you just called has not been written. So let's write the function that will be activated when we click the mouse button. Functions start with the keyword function, followed by parentheses indicating the trigger or event that called the function, the expected output, normally void if no values are returned, and braces contain the instructions. For now, we'll create a function that contains a trace command. Trace commands feed back to the animate output panel whatever's inside. This can be a variable or a literal string, which is simply composed of characters including letters, numbers, spaces, and punctuation. These must be surrounded by quotation marks. Now when we test our function, the output panel shows the results of the trace command. Knowing that this connection works, we can now build a more robust function that serves our game more fully. Now in the case of a time-based listener where we want it to do something every frame that passes, and again, we're usually working about 24 frames a second, we're going to start off with the same listener, so we're going to say stage. So we're attaching the listener to the stage, so it listens for time passing. Add event listener, and then I'm going to say event dot enter underscore frame. So this listens for the passage of time in this form of frames, and we'll say make a new function called doThing2. Alright, so now doThing2 again does not exist until we've written it. So it says access of undefined property doThing2 means I don't know what that is. Now this statement may be used sometimes on symbols or functions or whatever, but essentially just says you left something out, Holmes. So we're going to come in here and we're going to write out that function, and we're going to keep this pretty simple. We're just going to say function, same syntax we did before. Function, name the function, do, and you can double click this, and copy it, and I can paste, and then we'll say E, and then the event type again is up here was the mouse event, so it matches here to here. In this case, we're just using the event. So copy, and this is the general class of events and event types. Then we say void, and then our instructions. So this one is going to be the same basic thing as before. It's going to really put out a bunch of these though. It's going to be kind of a pain in the neck until you actually use it for something, which we'll do in a later exercise. So let's see, time keeps on slipping. Steve Miller song from back in the day. There we go. And there we go. And now if I run this, we can see it's working. You can't really just see it piling up, but there's a bunch of these happening as it goes. And there's nothing happening on the screen until we occasionally add a mouse click. Okay, so it's doing this and it's adding it up. Now later on we'll find that we're going to use that for something like, let's see, I've got a demo shooter here I think. And if I run this one, This is what's causing these objects to move. So the sampling of the time works by, in this case, it'll take EnterFrame move shots, and it's taking the objects and moving them in the Y direction. So it's just changing the Y values of the properties, and that's how these listeners work when you're building them into a game function. Alright, good job. We'll talk to you soon. Peace.